Never sell your Bitcoin, right?
When Donald Trump pledged his support for crypto during his presidential campaign, investors were buzzing about the industry's future. Yet for many, his presidency has so far felt underwhelming. While he has delivered on a number of key promises, the impact on crypto prices hasn't been as dramatic as many had hoped. However, this could be about to change.
This changes everything.
And that's because the US government has announced it's moving on-chain through a series of crypto partnerships, reigniting investor optimism. So today we'll look at which cryptos were chosen, what comes next, and the potential risks if things don't go as planned. My name is Nick, and this is a video you don't want to miss. Before we begin, just know that I'm not a financial advisor and nothing in this video should be considered financial or investment advice. This video is intended to inform you about the US government's blockchain plans. If you want more content like this, fire up those like and subscribe buttons and decimate that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Now, in case you missed the memo, President Donald Trump recently held a cabinet meeting at the White House. During the 3-hour and 17-minute meeting, just 25 seconds were spent discussing crypto. But that was enough to send crypto media outlets into a frenzy. And that's because it was revealed that the US government will now begin making key economic data metrics publicly viewable on-chain for the first time in history. And that was revealed by US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who said that the Commerce Department will be adding gross domestic product data on-chain with more economic data to be added in the future. Lutnick added that once the Commerce Department has finished, quote, ironing out all of the details, other government agencies would begin distributing their data across the blockchain too. Basically, the US government is slowly going to put all of its data on-chain. For context, the aforementioned White House meeting took place on the 26th of August, and just 2 days later, on the 28th, the Commerce Department distributed 3 pairs of key economic indicators from the Bureau of Economic Analysis on-chain. Each pair included the absolute level and the quarterly percentage change. To understand this historic move fully, though, it would probably be helpful to understand what these data metrics actually are. Of course, the first indicator is the GDP, or Gross Domestic Product. It measures the value of domestically produced goods and services adjusted for inflation. The GDP level shows how big the economy is, while the percentage change shows how much the economy has grown or shrunk on a quarterly basis. The second indicator is the PCE, or Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, and it measures how much the prices of goods and services have shifted. The indicator offers insight into consumer sentiment and often serves as a precursor for inflation. A fun fact, the PCE is considered to be the Fed's favorite inflation measure. Now, the third indicator is the real final sales to private domestic purchasers. Yeah, it's a mouthful, but basically it measures the value of goods sold to the US domestic market adjusted for inflation. It's often used to gauge consumer momentum and demand in the economy. So now that we know what's been put on-chain, this begs the question of why? The answer appears to be threefold. A press release from the Commerce Department reveals that it, quote, hopes to demonstrate the wide utility of blockchain technology. It also aims to demonstrate a proof of concept for all of government and to build on the Trump administration's historic efforts to make the United States of America the blockchain capital of the world. Put differently, the government hopes that issuing data on the blockchain will help further promote its legitimacy. And this relates to the second reason, which is transparency. Putting data on the blockchain means that it's viewable by anybody at any time. And this means that any changes or discrepancies can be spotted right away, effectively making the data immutable and less prone to corruption. And incidentally, this ties into the third reason, which is immutability, although this one comes with a caveat. And that's because Lutnick has promised to, quote, make America's economic truth immutable and globally accessible like never before. However, a key reason for this decision is that Trump has often questioned the credibility of US economic data. For example, GDP data. Now, for Q1 this year, it showed a 0.3% contraction, which Trump brushed off as a tariff-driven blip. In May, the Congressional Budget Office gave a 1.8% growth forecast. Now, Trump felt this was underwhelming, dismissed it as bias, and said that the economy could actually grow by 9%, which is a huge discrepancy. And in July, the BLS reported only 73,000 new positions and reduced the number of jobs from previous months after revising a more complete dataset. Trump responded by accusing the Bureau's commissioner of, quote, rigging the data before firing her. But this is where that caveat comes in. While adding economic data to the blockchain does indeed make it transparent and effectively immutable, it doesn't necessarily mean the initial data itself is more accurate. This apparent oversight could cause problems later down the road, but more on that later. Now, as we touched on earlier, the US government has already begun distributing macroeconomic data onto a number of public blockchains. So, which blockchains were selected, and how exactly was that data put on-chain? In total, 9 different blockchains were named by the Commerce Department in its aforementioned press release. Those 9 blockchains are Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Tron, Stellar, Avalanche, Arbitrum One, Polygon Proof of Stake, and Optimism. The agency also confirmed that it had sent data through Chainlink and Pyth, both of which are Oracle networks, with the help of Coinbase, Gemini, and Kraken. Now, for those wondering why the Commerce Department chose to use 2 different oracles, the answer is that they will each serve different functions. Chainlink will be the oracle used to bring the economic data on-chain, whereas Pyth will be responsible for verifying that data and providing historical backtracking. Anyway, on the day of the announcement, Chainlink published a blog stating that the economic data had been made available on 10 different blockchains, with other chains incorporated later depending on user demand. Those 10 blockchains are Arbitrum, Avalanche, Base, Botanix, Ethereum, Linea, Mantle, Optimism, Sonic, and ZK Sync. And this means that in total, 17 different blockchains have been named as part of the initiative. And that reminds me, if you're looking to buy any of the cryptos that I just mentioned, then be sure to maximize your gains with the Coin Bureau deals page. That's where you'll find exclusive trading fee discounts of up to 70% and sign-up bonuses of up to $100,000 on the best crypto exchanges. Now, these deals are only available for Coin Bureau viewers and they won't be around forever. So take advantage of them ASAP using the link down below or by scanning this QR code. Now back to the video. So then, how exactly was the data made available? Well, in the Commerce Department's press release, it confirmed that it had, quote, published a hash of the BEA's quarterly GDP data release for Q2 2025, along with the top-line GDP growth figure for Q2. In a nutshell, the BEA published the data as a PDF. The Commerce Department then downloaded this PDF and applied a SHA-256 hash, basically a cryptographic reference of that file. As just mentioned, this macroeconomic data is being pushed on-chain through Chainlink's data feeds and will be updated monthly or quarterly depending on when the data is actually published. Meanwhile, Pyth will be publishing GDP data stretching back 5 years, offering quarterly updates. Notably though, this isn't intended to replace the existing methods of publishing this key economic data. Rather, it's intended to create additional ways to make the data publicly viewable, offering transparency and composability that isn't so easily supported by traditional systems. Be that as it may though, the move does open up new possibilities, especially in DeFi. For instance, so-called flat coins could use the PCE data to ensure that they are adequately keeping up with inflation, which is what flat coins are designed to do, but that's a topic for another video. Alternatively, prediction markets could use the on-chain PCE index to forecast future inflation rates. Data analytics dashboards could also become more accurate and up-to-date, and there's even the potential for an entirely new category of digital assets. Now, you'd think that the US government publishing economic data on-chain for the first time ever would be enough to send crypto prices vertical. What's bizarre, though, is that despite the historic announcement, only one of the cryptos I mentioned earlier saw any real price movement. The outlier in question was Pyth Network, which saw a much-needed God candle as it doubled in price in a single day. Great news for you if you diamond-handed Pyth. There were a few other cryptos that saw modest pumps, but nothing really worth getting excited about. Behind Pyth, the crypto that saw the second biggest rally was Chainlink's Link, which pumped by 6% on the day. Not quite as impressive as pulling a 2x, and what's worse is that those gains were wiped out the following day and then some. Regardless, it's only logical that the cryptos selected by the Commerce Department will benefit in the long term. Now, to refresh your memory, the list of cryptos in order of market cap include Bitcoin's BTC, Ethereum's ETH, Solana's Sol, Tron's TRX, Chainlink's Link, Stellar's XLM, Polygon's Pol, Arbitrum's ARB, Optimism's OP, Pyth's Sonic's S, and ZK Sync's ZK. Note that this list could be longer by the time you watch this video. We should also note that some of the cryptos chosen by the Commerce Department don't actually have their own tokens, at least at the time of shooting this video. And these include Base, an Ethereum Layer 2, and Botanix, a Bitcoin Layer 2. There's also Linea, another Ethereum Layer 2, which is preparing to launch its own Linea token with a token generation event scheduled for the 10th of September. Until these chains launch their own tokens, this means that the potential gains will likely go to their respective Layer 1 chains instead, Ethereum for Base and Linea, and Bitcoin for Botanix. In any case, the apparent lack of price action across the charts has many investors wondering whether the recent news really will drive demand for these blockchains, or whether it's a complete nothing burger. So far, it seems to be the latter, and the biggest reason for this is likely because accessing this data offers little in the way of real incentives, aside from purchasing tiny amounts of crypto to cover transaction fees. However, we happen to think that as the use cases for putting this data on-chain become more apparent, the demand for these blockchains will increase in a big way for several reasons. First, the initiative opens the door to broader participation from investors, institutions, economists, and even other governments. With economic data more accessible than ever, decisions around macroeconomic events can be made in real time. Economists will gain clearer insights, investors and institutions can act on better information, and governments worldwide will be able to monitor the US economy more effectively. The second reason, as mentioned earlier, is the potential impact on DeFi protocols. Reliable economic data feeds can power new lending, derivatives, and even insurance products tied to macroeconomic events. And this not only creates exciting new opportunities, but also helps further bridge the gap between traditional finance and crypto. And logically, as more data sets become available over time, more opportunities will be made possible. And the third reason why this initiative could drive demand is that it could inspire other governments to do the same, which would in turn boost the adoption of the participating blockchains. Some would argue that this is inevitable, since any governments that refuse to offer the same transparency could easily appear to be corrupt. By now, you know that so far, 3 major economic metrics have made their way onto the blockchain: GDP, the PCE index, and the real final sales to private domestic purchasers. But those are just the beginning. With so many other data points out there, the big question is, what next? From our perspective, the data sets that are most likely to end up on-chain next are the big hitters, so to speak. This means that key releases that are closely watched by market analysts everywhere, such as inflation and the Consumer Price Index or CPI, they could be next in line. Following that, we could see other important economic data sets added on-chain, such as non-farm payrolls and the unemployment rate. Others could then be added later, such as retail sales, durable goods orders, trade balance, and industrial production. You get the point though, there's a plethora of economic indicators that could be given the blockchain treatment. Now notably though, this would mean that a number of other government departments and agencies would move on-chain just like the Commerce Department has. For instance, the Treasury Department could publish things like budget data, treasury yields, and federal debt. The Bureau of Labor Statistics could move on-chain by publishing employment and wage statistics, and like jobs reports and the unemployment rate. And the Census Bureau could add data releases on things like population and housing. Heck, even the SEC and the Federal Reserve could move on-chain, which would have been impossible to think just 1 year ago. Crazy how much things have changed. When it comes to which cryptos might be chosen next to host government data, the truth is that no one can say for sure. At this stage, all we can do is speculate, but there are a few likely contenders. One narrative that could be considered is interoperability-focused projects such as Polkadot or Cosmos. Now, these projects are designed to connect different blockchains, which could align with the US government's aim of distributing its economic data as broadly as possible. Come to think of it, the government could also work with additional oracles for the same reason. Another area that could be worth considering is cryptos that were made in America. Now, you might recall that this narrative was a hot topic at the start of the year, with many investors speculating that these projects could see outsized benefits under a Trump presidency. In the end, though, the hype largely fizzled out. Still, as the United States pushes to cement its role as the global hub of crypto innovation, it wouldn't be surprising if the government turned to homegrown projects as a way to highlight and showcase domestic innovation. Ultimately, though, the list of potential cryptos is almost limitless, and that's simply because just about any blockchain can receive the government's economic data through its partnerships with Oracle networks such as Chainlink and Pyth. Now, while all of this is ultimately very bullish for the adoption of the crypto industry, this is also a monumental step with no previous examples for the US government to draw on. What could possibly go wrong? Well, let's start with something we touched on earlier in the video. You'll recall that the decision to put economic data on-chain seems to have been fueled by Trump's skepticism of the data's legitimacy. As such, making that data transparent and immutable seems like the obvious thing to do. The problem, though, is that immutability doesn't guarantee accuracy. If on-chain data is again questioned by the president and his administration, this could actually be bad for crypto. And that's simply because it would seem to the untrained eye that it was crypto that was at fault, which could make the industry harder to trust. This is unfortunately the case if any data is uploaded to the blockchain with errors, since those errors would not be reversible. And this could in turn cause unnecessary disruption to the markets, and of course, the bigger the error, the bigger the market impact. It's also debatable whether too much transparency could actually be a bad thing. And that's because it would restrict the government's ability to implement interventions behind the scenes, such as emergency fiscal measures, without first revealing its intention to markets, adversaries, or other governments. And this ties into the potential for systemic risks. If the US government's on-chain disclosures become crucial to the health of the financial markets, technical failures or data availability issues could cause havoc. Put simply, having this data become unavailable for any reason would spark panic among investors. And in the absolute worst case scenario, this initiative could even create risks to national security in the US. And that's because having economic data sets so freely available to the public could expose the country to external threats like coordinated attacks on financial infrastructure or targeting of specific national assets. Of course, the caveat is that these hypothetical scenarios are just that, hypothetical, and not to mention highly unlikely. In reality, the government is rolling out this economic data on-chain slowly and methodically, and it's likely that this has been done deliberately to avoid any market disruptions. And that's why we believe that this initiative is actually incredibly bullish for crypto adoption and will go a long way to supporting its long-term growth. Over time, this will be huge for bringing new users to the blockchain selected by the US government, and by extension, the broader crypto market. As for when their respective cryptos could actually pump, well, that's anyone's guess. Okay, if you want to see our latest Chainlink update, then you can check out our video on that right over here. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, why not? You can do that right over here. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Nick, over and out.